Overthinking is not about needing to know the right answer. It's usually about avoiding something so much deeper, about avoiding vulnerability, avoiding rejection, avoiding what it is that you would learn about yourself if you actually did that deeper work and you stopped looking for certainty. So, I'm going to talk about that today. So, my name is Crystal Holman. I'm an intuitive identity coach, and I help people stop abandoning themselves and life and love so that they can truly come back home to themselves and be able to live fully expressed, grounded, and honest in who they are and in their life so they can feel seen and supported in relationships for exactly who they are. Let's get into it. Why do you keep overthinking your relationships? Why do you keep overthinking things? I think it's really important to recognize that overthinking is you attempting to find certainty in something, right? So it's the need for you to feel sure about something or to feel safe, right, about something. And so whenever you're overthinking something, may it be a relationship, may it be a situation, may it be something that you're doing in life, right? It's because there's a part of you that is, well, your brain, right, is looking for something to feel certain so that they can feel safe enough to say that this is going to work out. So anytime we're overthinking, it's because we're not sure that things are going to work out. We don't have that certainty, right? And when that comes down to things when it's outside of a relationship, right? That may not be the easiest thing to acquire all the time when it's not including having to engage with somebody else. Because that there may just be things in your life that are uncertain, right? There may just be things in your life that you may not ever be able to know for sure exactly, right? Until you know. I mean, until that time comes and you do know, right? So the way that you would manage that would be very different than the way that you would manage this in relationships. But in relationships, when you're constantly overthinking, a lot of the time, this is because you're anxious. There's certain things that you haven't been able to say or hear or experience in the relationship, which are making you worry about where you stand, worry about if the person still cares about you, worry about if they actually like you, right? This could also look like you feeling like worried about if someone's upset with you or angry with you, right? So anytime we are coming from that state in like a relationship dynamic, it's so important to recognize that that's anxiety. And that comes down to you not knowing what you need to know to feel safe and comfortable within the relationship, right? And so this idea that anxious attachment is needy is just not real. The real deal is that anxious people who are anxiously attached, a lot of the times they're attracted to avoidantly attached people, right? So there's this weird dynamic that plays out between them where one person is kind of chasing and the other person is usually running, right? The anxious and avoidant kind of dynamic that happens. And this is because unconsciously, someone who is anxious feels like they need to earn love, right? So they're going to attract partners who are going to pull away. That's just the way that it is. And partners who are avoidant are scared of love. And so they also are attracted to people who will give them enough, make them feel like they're enough, right? Those kinds of things. It's kind of like this weird cycle that happens. And so, this idea that people who are anxiously attached are needy, it's just not true. What the reality is that they're just not receiving what they actually need in the relationship and dynamic to feel comfortable, to feel safe, for their nervous system to feel safe and comfortable. And so this looks like them, needing reassurance and asking constantly for things. But the reality is that they are needing these things because there are certain needs that are not being met for them in the relationship, right? And if they're in a relationship with somebody who's more avoidant, that's partially because the avoidant partner is not going to be able to show up in the way that they need them to. right? Because they're going to have a hard time communicating feelings. They're going to have a hard time meeting them in that space because they're kind of a runner in that way. So having to show up and be vulnerable like that is scary for them. So a lot of the times they don't always do that, or they can't do that, right? And so this is why it's really important to recognize that, especially when you're overthinking in relationships, it's about asking yourself, what do you actually need in the relationship that you're not receiving? And is this something that you can actually talk to your partner about to receive or not? Right? Is this something that your partner's actually works with you to obtain or not? Because if the or not is happening, right? Or we're talking romantic partner, what does it matter? Any type of relationship, right? If that other person is not able to meet you where you need to be met so that you can feel secure and safe in the relationship, then there's a part of you that's settling for less than what you actually need to feel safe in relationships. And I know that's probably not the easiest thing to hear. And there is something that you are just not receiving that you actually need to feel calm and comfortable and not anxious. Because anytime you are anxious in relationships, this is coming back to the idea that you're anxious because there's something that you're not being honest about. There's something that you're needing that you're sacrificing, right? So anytime that you're anxious in relationships, it's usually because there's something unsaid or there's a need not being met. And that's usually because something is not being said. And so it's important for you to recognize that that is where the work needs to happen. That's where things need to shift. And most of the time, we overthink these things rather than put ourselves out there, rather than just speak our truth, rather than do that deeper work, right? And we do that because we're afraid of rejection. So instead of doing the deeper work, instead of showing up as exactly what we need, instead of verbalizing those things, right? Instead of being fully expressed and honest and upfront, we avoid doing those things because we don't want to be rejected. And so we kind of feed this anxious cycle that we end up living in a lot of the time. We end up participating in the continuation of that, I guess is the best way to put it, especially when this is happening in relationships. And I know this really well because there was a time where I told myself that if I just was understanding enough, if I just picked my battles, if I wasn't too picky, if I was, laid back and chill, if I was low maintenance, then things would be okay, right? And when I told myself, it didn't change the fact that I felt anxious in those relationships. It didn't change how I felt in those dynamics, telling myself that. It just kept me in the same pattern over and over and over again. And this pattern was a way that I was abandoning myself to stay in connection with someone else. And I did this because I was afraid that if I was upfront, right, that it wouldn't go well. And it's really important to recognize that a lot of the times we're engaging in these ways with other people because we are trying to avoid rejection. We're trying to avoid abandonment. We're trying to avoid being hurt, right? Which I always think is very interesting now because it was hurtful or harmful for me to stay in that anxious space as long as I did in relationships. That wasn't enjoyable for me, right? Like living in that space for so much of my life was actually really exhausting and really detrimental in certain ways. And so when I think about it now, it's like really bizarre to me because I'm so different at this point, right? Which is exactly why I created my program, Fully Expressed and Unavailable for Less, is because I teach other people how to do this and get to this place. But it's just so interesting to me now because I think about how in the past I really was very anxious in relationships and it was exhausting. I was constantly overgiving, I was constantly overdoing, I was constantly so tired, right? And I didn't have any energy left for myself. And that's exactly what I shift in my program and the work that I've personally done at this point, where I'm not chasing relationships anymore. I'm not sacrificing myself in relation. I'm not abandoning myself in those situations anymore. I've learned how to become confident and trust myself to enough to be able to show up as exactly who I am in my relationships. And by doing that, I don't feel anxious in relationships anymore. But that was such a drain on me. It was such a drain on my life force for such a long time. And, as I was doing it, right, like we tell ourselves, well, this is what I need to do. This is just the way that things are, right? Like we convince ourselves that it's actually okay, even though we're exhausted, even though we're so tired, we don't have anything left for ourselves. But the other piece of this too, as I'm thinking back, that I really told myself a lot too, was like this idea that if I did speak up, if I was honest, right? And let's say the relationship didn't work out for whatever reason, because that person wasn't willing to meet me halfway, right? Then what would that mean? That would mean that I felt what way about myself? I made meaning of myself being what, right? Like, I felt like if I did that, then I would be too much, right? I would be intense. I would be high maintenance. I would be all of these different things if I ended up doing that. And then it ended up not turning out the way that I wanted it to, right? And the truth is that those things were what I was labeling myself to keep myself from actually being truthful and honest and showing up. And it just maintained that anxious kind of cycle that I was stuck in. It's just very interesting because I feel like we don't even recognize that we're doing it until we're doing it. And then what I mean by that is like we don't even recognize what we're doing until we've pulled ourselves out of it, and then we can look back on it, and then we can see things very, very clearly compared to still being in it. And this is why coaching works, because it's somebody outside of yourself that can see something that you can't see while you're in it. Right? We have so many blind spots when we're in something specific, especially when we're emotionally involved in something. And anytime you are abandoning yourself, right? And overthinking is one of these ways. Anytime you're doing that, it's because you're afraid of getting too close to yourself. You're afraid of what you're going to see if you go in there. You're afraid of what's going to happen if you check under the hood, right? I know I've heard that one a ton of times from clients. And also, I know I felt that way as well at a point in time where I was afraid to see what I didn't want to see. And so it was easier to focus on other people. It was easier to be anxious in relationships. It was easier than being by myself and having to do that work and having to face myself in that way, because it can be fucking terrifying and it can be scary, especially if you've ever done it before. So you don't really know what's even in there, right? And I know that like even with clients like have gone a long time with like avoiding that and not even going there. And so I just want to acknowledge that as I'm talking about this, it's so interesting to think about how when I was in it, I couldn't see it. You know what I mean? Until I was out of it and I'm looking back on it now, that's when I'm seeing certain things that I just couldn't see before. And I think that's true with a lot of things. But this is exactly why coaching works. And so if you want more information about my program, Fully Expressed and Unavailable for Less, you can find information at crystalclearmystic.com. I also do private coaching as well, and I help people to be able to come back to themselves and stop abandoning themselves so they can truly step into the version of themselves who is happy and energized and feels excited on a day-to-day basis and is not stuck in this overthinking pattern, but knows how to manage that and move through that so it doesn't invade their life and take over. I hope you have a great day. Take care.